So hello, my name's Ilyena Hirskyj-Douglas. As he said, I'm from up north, so it's a long travel down today, unfortunately. I'm from part of the Animal-Computer Interaction Group, which focuses on making technology for dogs. So in this work, we sort of focus on how you design technology for dogs, what methods you use in making technology for dogs. I'm going to talk a bit about methods that I use, mostly focusing around dogs, and talk about an animal-centric approach, which is sort of putting animals more in the center of the design. I try and aim in my work to sort of do it so I understand from an animal's perspective. Now, this may seem quite hard because obviously I cannot go up to my dog and ask him exactly what he thinks. So the biggest challenge within my work is actually to collect feedback from my dog and from the dogs that I use. So the two things that I mostly do is I make methods. So I try and make methods so the dog can take a role within the design. And so when he does this, he can have a meaningful interaction. I also make technology for the dogs so that they can get involved within the interaction themselves. So I'm firstly going to start off with a story about a chimpanzee called Washu. He was the third chimpanzee to be used in the US space program in Nevada in the 1960s. It was to do with language acquisition, and they were trying to teach him to speak English. The first one, they had no luck in. The second one, they learned 4 words, and he was the new guy on the block. So I'm going to sort of bring back to that later, but they were trying to sort of get a communication guidelines and a communication speak between the chimpanzee and the owner. So as we all know, has anyone here got an animal or a pet? Yeah? As we all know, I often speak to my dog, and everyone thinks I'm crazy. My dog doesn't speak back to me, of course. But there's more to this communication than just me speaking to my dog. My dog will speak back to me in different forms of communication. He'll often wink at me, he'll have facial expressions. You know, there's the pitch and tone of your voice that you use, there's the kinesthetics that you use, the gestures and the body language. And all of this helps me gather feedback from dogs. Just because I haven't got the voice there doesn't mean that he is not telling me something, doesn't mean that we are not having a communication. And it's through getting computers involved within our communication that hopefully this field will develop. So I'm just going to talk a bit about how I got into this. So 4 years ago, I was doing my master's in computer science. I thought, brilliant idea, let's get a dog. And so this is my dog here, a black Labrador. I would notice he was watching TV for a ridiculous amount of time. So I started trying to film him watching different programs, Coronation Street, Emmerdale, documentaries, Walking with Dinosaurs, you name it, he watched it. And I started to film him from different angles. So this is him watching, as you can see, 2 dogs playing. This is him watching Coronation Street. Just in case you wonder where he goes off to, his bed's over there. He's not that interested in this very much. So if you look at this is obviously a camera from behind and from above the TV. He's very much interested in the dogs, and he's trying to play with me here. He's brought a little toy. He's thinking, I don't know what you're filming me for. And so I then took this on I filmed lots and lots of dogs once I started to notice that there was this preference in my dog. And I found out that not only do dogs can recognize what's on the TV, but they have a preference within it. If you see here, he's completely gone. He's not even interested anymore. And I found out dogs like to watch, quite simply, other dogs. It's a big study for not very, very good results, maybe. If you show them other animals, they're quite interested. Despite living with a wonderful owner like me, wasn't actually interested at all in humans. You showed him shapes, and he wouldn't even bother looking. So this sort of got me to thinking that although he didn't tell me he liked watching other dogs, through his movements, I can know he likes watching other dogs, and I know other dogs like watching this. And so it's learning to get beyond the barriers that are there. So I went one step beyond this, and I thought, brilliant, he can watch TV, now what I can do for him. What can I do for my dog so that he can interact in the same way that we use a TV remote? So what I did is I built a dog head tracker. And what it does is it monitors within, it's not very specific, it's only within 3 sections or within 3 screens where he is looking on the screen. So this allows me to collect exactly what he's looking at, not only the subject he's looking at. So it changes, once again, the feedback I'm getting from him into a more complex. And it allows his body language, so I'm not training him to look at the screen, I'm just collecting his natural responses. And in this way, I sort of started to build up frameworks for how you build technology with dogs and putting them in the center of the technology. And not me trying to train a dog to use something, not me saying, sit down in front of a TV and watch it. So in my sort of method of me working with dogs, I try and put myself in the position of the dog and try and let him just use the technology a lot of the time. In the same way that you mentioned with children, you know, he can walk away, he doesn't need to stay at the screen. You see, like I end up with quite a lot of null data, much to my tutor's annoyance, just because he goes away. And this puts the dog straight in the middle of the design. And it allows me to get more true results from him and not with my bias. So from this, I made, and this is mainly what I'm going to talk about, I realized quite a lot of things are dog-centered. From this, I made a doggy ladder of participation. Animal computing is quite a growing field. It was in quite a few conferences. And the trouble is, traditionally, when you're working with animals, you know, you train them to push a button, or you train them to move around, and then you say, right, so brilliant, I trained him to push a button, and he pushed a button. That doesn't mean anything. And the dog has no value in that. The dog doesn't understand what's going on. And so this is my method of trying to include the dog within the design, putting him in the center, and getting him to participate in what we're doing. So I realize this is quite confusing. Don't worry, I'll go through it step by step. So there's two halves to this. I have the non-participation half and the participation. So I'm just going to take it. These top two here are the non-participation. And this is sort of where you're including a dog within a study to say, yeah, you know, I showed a dog, I trained a dog to sit in front of a TV and it watched TV. Like, brilliant. So this is where you have an ornamental sort of design. You will manipulate the dog into doing exactly what you wanted, you know, and you often give him a reward. So you say, congratulations, you watched TV for 3 minutes, I'm giving you a treat. And so the dog wouldn't actually watch TV because he wanted to see what's on TV. He wants the treat. And, you know, with this method of force feedback, you end up with biased results. And you end up with studies that don't get to the true center of what the dog wants. So the second one is a bit higher up, where you don't include any training. So we're letting the dog do his ordinary behavior. And we're letting the dog walk away. Now, like you mentioned in yours, where you let the children stop the play, I think it's very important to let the dog stop it. So if you saw in mine, like when I do work, or usually do it at the dog's home, I say to the owner, you know, if the dog wants to walk away, the dog can walk away. If he's not interested, I'm not going to force him to get interested, because I'm not going to get his true results. And I can sit there and I can force him to, but I'm not going to get what I want. And this gives him a minimal voice, in the sense that I'm not training him, he can walk away, but I'm not really giving him any option over what he does. And this is why it's not a participation method, because I'm still using the dog within my study, but he still doesn't have a choice. Now, moving up to the second two, the participation, is where the dog is more informed. This is more where my work sort of sits at the moment, where I'm not only looking at what a dog's doing, but I'm looking at why. So I include the owners in a lot of my work and animal behaviorists, because really my dog watches TV, but why? He watches dogs, but if I don't know why he watches dogs, how can I design systems for him? And so this pulls in a lot of their body language. It creates more of a reactive system. And so by including the dog's emotions, you sort of get a fuller picture of the interaction going on. And I think this is very important because it sort of empowers the dog to be not only as a sort of a user within the system, but a real true end user, even though, as many people would just think, he's just a dog. The last bit, this is more of a conceptual route, where I want to empower a dog. I believe that through the advancements of technology, especially, you know, biotechnology and technology where you can sort of monitor the feedback of what the dog's giving you, that a dog will eventually be able to, like I mentioned before, where they have that, you and your dog would have that unspoken communication. A computer would be able to get involved in that communication, recognize what's going on, and it would sort of advance into where the dog can interact with the technology in a similar way that we do. This is where its choices would impact directly against what's going on in the system, against what the designers are doing, and against the activities that are taking place. This allows for a frequent conversation that we have, like I said, to go in to the technology, and it allows the technology to evolve with the dog and the dog with the technology. So you might have noticed within that ladder, there's like 2 key themes going on. I just tried to sort of map them out. So the first one is the knowledge of activity. I think it's really important to sort of give the animal a chance within it. You know, I think it's very easy to say that a dog doesn't understand what's going on TV, but my research shows it does. And I think unless you sort of empower the dog to be within it, then you're never going to find out its true potential. The second one is the right not to participate, and that is strictly in order to get unbiased results. If you force someone to do something, you are never going to get true results. So just to bring back to WashU, what they ended up doing was they finally got an animal behaviourist involved, and they found out that chimpanzees don't actually have the vocal cord to speak, so they'd wasted the past 2. And so what they found out was that they actually use body language, like humans do, as a form of interpersonal communication. And so they decided to teach the chimpanzee American Sign Language. And after a few years, it had over 350 words, and it was the first interspecies communication. And that just shows that, you know, you can't underestimate your animal user, and you have to put in place a feedback method that is relevant. So I think it's very important just from this. I realise no one's really going to be making animal technology, and if you do, I'm very interested, to alter your method for your users. And that, like I think is quite a theme within this, that it's not always going to be spoken. I think it's very important to allow for participation. And secondly, by allowing for participation, you allow the dog to get involved in the system, creating a better system, enabling better design, enabling better user experience. So I'd like to thank you for listening, and I'm open to any questions.
We have lots of questions, I'm sure there's a lot. The gentleman there first. Michael, you're up next. Gentleman there, yes.
Yeah, really fascinating. Is there anything from your research that kind of jumps to mind that you could see application for this, you know, over and above like actually being able to communicate with the dog? I mean, within sort of like, I don't know, emergency services or different areas where they put, you know, where dogs obviously are kind of you know, have a working relationship with humans.
Yeah, so there's work currently going on at the moment, not in my lab, I think in London actually, where they're doing stuff with cancer detection, and I work with the RSPCA to do things like, so dogs that are especially disadvantaged, kept in kennels, often don't get a lot of walk amount of the day. A system like this would be brilliant just to keep them interactive and things like that. So I think, you know, it has a lot bigger implementations than just the dog, but I think you have to sort of focus back down on it in order to get to the real centre. Thank you.
Always a question in the industry, how many test participants did you use?
For which one? Which one?
Like on average, or like different tests?
It varies a lot. I'll be honest, my dog is a bit of a test subject, and I'm quite lucky in the fact that for my studies, it completely varies. I wouldn't be able to say.
What have you found most successful? Perhaps is what I'm asking.
Number of participants. 3 or 4, just because it gets, by having that small of a number, you don't just do a skim slice, you do a real deep analysis. And I think it was Nelson who said you can get within under 5 users, you can get most of the problems and most of the feedback. And it's usually after my first working with my dog in the initial study that I scope most of it out, and then it's just sort of fleshing it out with all the other dogs. Yeah.
My question follows on from that. How much variability is there between dogs?
Oh God, yeah, a lot. It varies a lot, but just because, so I originally, when I started face tracking dogs, I decided that it was a good idea to try and use a human face tracker. Never again. Dogs have very different skull shapes. They have very different sense of smell, very different sense of hearing. You know, everything's such a variability. So when I work with Jack Russells, I'll put the TV really low just because I know they can't see that high. Because my dog's quite a big dog, so he's got it a lot higher. So it's things like that you just sort of have to sort of look out for.
Sure, I mean, those are the physical variabilities, but what about their sort of cognitive variabilities?
There's not actually a lot of research done into the different cognitive variabilities breed-wise, but I understand what you're saying. I think my Labrador's quite smart compared to.
Any more questions?